McCabe so far has been worried more about pensions than prison.
They're coming after me because of my city, and they're against LGBT, and they're against poor children. That's been my mantra.
I always say the same thing. Our children, our children, our children.
I don't think anybody can tell you when life begins. Human life begins. I completely respect a woman's right to choose. It is up to a woman to have her own right to choose the size and timing of her family. God gives us a free will.
Our children, our children, our children, our children, our children.
Yes, I am a liberal.
When does Hillary Clinton ride off into the sunset?
Not soon enough.
And there was much rejoicing.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. When we get to the call segments at the end of the first and second hour, you'll be able to talk about anything that's been in the news this past week. Does need to be something that has been in the news, but we have cast a pretty broad net on Friday, so we're looking forward to that. Jeff?
Everything but spam. We're going spam-free Friday.
Spam-free Friday? No, people can talk about spam today.
All right.
In fact, we had a spam-a-palooza here at the AFA. A generous gift we had from an individual that works at Hormel sent us 110 can of every brand, every variety of spam that Hormel makes. And so we used them here last Friday, had a little bit of fun with that. Took what we wanted, then we set the rest out for the AFA staff to help themselves. Let's just put a note out, help yourself, Spam-a-palooza. So you got the Ticino, you got the jalapeno variety out there, you got the low-fat Spam out there. And, man, those puppies just disappeared.
Yeah.
You know, that's sort of oxymoron, the low-fat Spam.
Yeah, I don't know what that, but anyway.
we need to make some friends with people that work at Nutella.
Yeah,
that would be the better option.
Well, Jim Stanley, general manager, he's walking by my office yesterday. Hey, next time, why don't you talk about whoever makes Krugerrands?
What are Krugerrands?
Whoever makes Krugerrands. Those are those South African gold bars.
Oh, yeah.
How about a friend at the Krugerrand factory? What would that be like?
Or a diamond mine, maybe?
Yeah. Anyway, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in the book of 2 Samuel. The website where you can follow along, read, and pray along with us is pray.afa.net. Encourage you to go there and read along with us and pray along with us. Have a scripture passage for every day, a prayer that incorporates the very words of that passage of scripture. Now we're in 2 Samuel chapter 19. Remember, we've gone through this deal. This section here is where Absalom launched a coup d'etat against David. David had to run for his life, had to leave town with the people that were with him. They crossed the Jordan River, went to the other side to a place called Machanaim. Then they had a clash between the two armies. 20,000 of Absalom's folks died. He got hung up on a tree. Joab went there, ran him through the heart with 3 javelins. He's dead. Dump him in a hole in the ground in the forest and pile rocks on top of him. And so the threat is diffused from Absalom, and the kingdom is now beginning to come back together. And this is a chapter 19, that talks about the reconciliation of those that were coming back together after the nation had been fractured. Now, the people at this time, of course, are very uncertain. They don't know what David's going to do to the people that didn't go with him into exile. Remember, Absalom was very vindictive, and Joab was very vindictive. Is David going to be vindictive? What kind of trouble are we going to be in if we did not go with him into exile? Afraid that he was going to take it out on them, was going to accuse them of being disloyal. So there was a lot of dis-ease and anxiety in the land. But David puts that to rest. Right away he says, "You are my brothers, you are my bone and my flesh." And he, by the way, promised to fire Joab as commander of his troops. Remember, there was nobody like Joab. He was cruel and he was vicious. I mean, Absalom is hanging in the tree. David had told his army, "You leave him alone. Deal gently with my son Absalom for my sake." Joab blew right past that, stuck 3 javelins right in the guy's heart. That finally was the last straw for David. He finally found something that would prompt him to carry out discipline against Joab. So he tells the people he's going to replace him as the commander-in-chief with Amasa. Now, Amasa was Absalom's commander-in-chief, so this is a gesture of reconciliation to those who had aligned with Absalom. He was so genuine, David was, and sincere in his appeal that in verse 14 it says, he swayed the heart of all the men of Judah as one man, so that Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and to bring the king over the Jordan. So they went down to the Jordan, they met him there at Gilgal, and they brought him in a parade across the Jordan and into Jerusalem. So now David's got peace in his kingdom, but there are a number of individuals from whom he had become alienated. Been a pretty severe rupture in relationships. The rest of the chapter is the story of his reconciliation with Shimei, number one, and then another individual we'll see in just a minute. Now remember, Shimei was the guy that was going alongside David's gang. He was on the other side of the valley, so they couldn't get to him when they were on the run. He was cursing David repeatedly, following him along the road, cursing him, throwing rocks at David, throwing stones at David, and throwing dust in the air. Now the battle is over. Shimei realizes David is the king, is going to be the king, and he knew that he was on the wrong side of that whole deal. So he rushes down to the Jordan as David is getting ready to cross it to come back to Judah. Shimei falls on his face before David and begs him for forgiveness. He says in verse 19, let not my Lord hold me guilty, or remember how your servant did wrong on the day my Lord the king left Jerusalem. Do not let the king take it to heart, for your servant knows that I have sinned. Now here's an example. We're not going to go much any further than this today, but here's an example of what you do when you want to make things right with somebody against whom you have sinned and you are estranged from, and you know that it's your fault. Number one, you adopt a spirit of humility. What Shimei did is he came and bowed on his face at David's feet. So in other words, when we want to reconcile with somebody, we don't come with any demands. We don't come with any expectations. We don't come insisting that people forget about the past, insisting that people forgive us, as if they've got some kind of an obligation to let bygones be bygones. We do not come in pride, but we come in humility, not to demand anything, but to confess something. We make ourselves vulnerable. And we realize in that moment how vulnerable we are because the response is out of our hands. And we may have to give them time to work things through. Second thing that's key, in Shimei's repentance, there are no excuses. He didn't try to justify what he'd done. He didn't try to minimize what he had done. He didn't try to blame anybody. If you read later on the chapter, Mephibosheth comes to David to try to reconcile, but he's blaming everybody but himself. My servant deceived me. And so he made it kind of a half-hearted apology to David, and he got half of his kingdom back. So partial repentance leads to partial restoration. But Shimei didn't. He said, I did wrong on the day you left, and I have sinned. Accepted full responsibility. And I think we need to do this. Anytime we're going to repent or seek reconciliation or forgiveness from someone, somewhere in there, we have to include the phrase, I was wrong. And the phrase, will you forgive me? And that's what Shimei did. He didn't try to pass the buck. He didn't blame anybody. And this is what genuine repentance looks like. Somewhere in there, you strip away all the excuses, all the explanations, all the justifications, and you say, look, what I did was wrong, and we accept full responsibility for what we did. It's not genuine repentance if it does not include the words, I was wrong, with no qualifiers. Well, let's go to prayer. Lord God, I pray for myself, for the listening audience of Focal Point and AFR, for every man, woman, and child in this land, all of our elected officials, our president, President Trump. I pray that we will grow to imitate the good examples that we are given here in Scripture. I pray that we will demonstrate David's willingness to forgive those who have sinned against us when they seek forgiveness from us. Protect us from the spirit of vengeance that we see in Abishai. We choose to forgive our debtors, even as we ask you to forgive us our debts. When we suffer terrible losses at the hands of others and have things snatched from us, I pray that you will restore to us the years that the locusts have eaten, as you did for David. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sheila from Tennessee attended one of the town hall meetings hosted by Dan Celia. She left thinking about different ways to handle her finances.
Dan Celia spoke a lot about tithing and being faithful to the Lord, and I definitely intend on getting in on this charitable gift annuity, which I've never done, but it sounds so exciting. Listening to him in there, it made me reevaluate my way of spending money, my way of doing, and it shows you that a little bit can go a long way when you place it in the Master's hands. So what we need to do, and what I intend on doing, is taking a little bit and making it be worth much for the Lord.
Find out if a charitable gift annuity from the AFA Foundation is right for you at 800-326-4543, extension 345. That's 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or email foundation@afa.net.
Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. Brian Fisher pointed out that President Calvin Coolidge, in his July 4th, 1926 speech commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, argued that the principles of the Declaration, like rights come from the Creator, all men are created equal, and government's power derives from the consent of the governed, are fixed, final, and immutable. Those who work against these fixed principles cannot lay claim to progress. So we should call them regressives, because working against the Declaration is absolutely backwards.
Visit the Hamilton Corner on the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to this free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity, and you are listening to ethanol-free radio. No additives, just pure high-octane fuel in our radio here at American Family Radio. Now, let's see, where do we want to start with content today? Let's start with an action alert that we have up at the American Family Association website, afa.net. Let me see if I can get there and grab that action alert. It's an action alert regarding Mike Pompeo, and it's a very, very important one, and I'll explain here in just a second why it is so important. Because this is there's a real threat, because Mike Pompeo, remember, has been nominated by President Trump to take the place of Rex Tillerson. And I've talked with you about Rex Tillerson before. Rex Tillerson was a guy that was gone on the homosexual agenda. He was the head of the Boy Scouts when they decided to include homosexuals as scout leaders. Well, that, in my mind, was the end of the Boy Scouts. What father, I ask you, what father in his right mind would take a chance on his boy being in the same tent with an adult homosexual, knowing the connection between adult homosexuality and pederasty, men having sex with male teenagers? There's an unquestioned connection there. They have a propensity toward that, which makes it extremely dangerous, and Rex Tillerson was at the head of that whole deal. Now, what we have done is put together an action alert that you can sign. It's a petition that you can sign that is an appeal to President Trump to withdraw the nomination of Kai Feldblum to be the EEOC commission chairman. And that's connected because she's a radical lesbian activist, LGBT activist. And remember, we've talked extensively about her. The main problem with her, she's going to be with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So she's going to have some kind of influence, possibly, on every workplace in America. And it's her view that if there is a conflict between religious liberty and the homosexual agenda, she cannot think of a single case in which religious liberty ought to triumph. And remember, most of these religious liberty cases take place where? In workplaces. That's where they take place. So she's going to be in charge of the federal commission that looks after the workplace. And she is a hardcore, committed lesbian activist. So we need to appeal to Donald Trump, and there's an opportunity to sign a petition at afa.net that will appeal to Donald Trump to withdraw her nomination. She's an opponent of religious liberty. She's an opponent of the natural family. She's an opponent of freedom in the marketplace. And so we want to encourage Donald Trump. Here's an opportunity to make your voice heard. Join your voice with others in the Focal Point or the American Family Association family and make an appeal to Donald Trump to withdraw that nomination. Now let's talk about Mike Pompeo, because it's the same issue of the homosexual agenda. Mike Pompeo has been nominated to replace Rex Tillerson as the head or as the Secretary of State. Remember, Tillerson was the guy that I just mentioned. He's the one that spearheaded the opening of the Boy Scouts to homosexual troop leaders. That was Rex Tillerson's doing. Then they opened them up to homosexuals being in the Boy Scouts. And that was, Rex Tillerson was still on the board when that happened. He wasn't the chairman, but he voted for that thing. So Rex Tillerson is an activist on the whole issue of homosexuality in the Boy Scouts. Now, Mike Pompeo, who's a great guy, rock bottom Christian guy, Mike Pompeo has been the head of the CIA up until this point. Now he's going to make a move over to the Secretary of State to replace Rex Tillerson, who got relieved of duty by President Trump. Now, here's the thing you need to be aware of. The LGBT activists, the homosexual activists of Big Gay, they have wasted absolutely no time in going after Mike Pompeo. I mean, with hammers and tongs and pitchforks, they're going after him. Chad Griffin, who's the president of the Human Rights Campaign, the leading homosexual activist group in the country, says that he is a reckless choice to lead the Secretary or the State Department. And this is why, and he's right about this, this is why it's important. This is what Chad Griffin says. Remember, he's a big-time gay activist. The State Department has a crucial role to play in advancing human rights. And see, he's right about that. What he understands is that the rest of the world has an amazing amount of regard for the United States. They look to America as an example of the values that a nation state ought to adopt and ought to exalt and ought to promote. So when the nations of the world, they see the Secretary of State coming to town, and all he can talk about is homosexuality and diversity, including the LGBT banner and celebrating Gay Pride Day, then they think that, well, we must be wrong. We've always thought homosexuality was unnatural, contrary to nature, contrary to the will of God. We must be wrong about that because the United States, big-time fan of homosexuality. So the State Department, which represents us around the world, has a huge influence on the way people perceive America and American values. And so he's right. The State Department has a crucial role to play in advancing human rights. And so we want to be sure that the rights to a natural family, the rights to exercise religious liberty without being punished by gay activists for your faith, that those rights are protected. Now, their problem with Mike Pompeo is that he doesn't believe anything that the Human Rights Commission believes. Now, here's what they accuse Mike Pompeo of. As attacking LGBTQ equality. And here's what they say. Here's their bullet list of what the problems they have with Mike Pompeo. He opposes marriage equality. I want to stop right there, ladies and gentlemen, and remind you that homosexuals have always had marriage equality. They've always had it. There's never been a time in American history where they did not have marriage equality. What is equality? It means the same rules apply to everybody. So homosexuals have always had marriage equality. They've had the right to marry an adult member of the opposite sex to whom they are not related. They've always had that right. Now, if they didn't choose to exercise that right, that's not our problem. They had the right to get married on the same basis that everybody else in America does. What they want, ladies and gentlemen, is not marriage equality. They want homosexual supremacy. They want homosexual rights, the homosexual agenda, to trump everything, including religious liberty and any respect or promotion of natural marriage. Now, they also ding Mike Pompeo for co-sponsoring efforts to allow states not to recognize same-sex marriage. Now, this is what the 10th Commandment says. If it's not in the Constitution to give the right to Congress, then it's something that belongs to the state. There's nothing in the Constitution about homosexual marriage. Not one single solitary word. You won't find the word homosexual or even the word marriage in the Constitution anywhere. What does that mean? It means that that is an issue that is reserved for the states. So Mike Pompeo doing something absolutely constitutional, saying this is a right that ought to be, this is an issue that ought to be reserved for the states, and states should not be forced to recognize same-sex marriage if they have a moral objection to it. And then also they say they complain that he wants to protect nonprofit businesses and organizations to use taxpayer resources to discriminate against LGBT people. Nonprofit organizations are going to discriminate against LGBT people. You've got an adoption agency, it's going to be nonprofit. If they want to reserve adoption for heterosexual couples, the LGBT crowd is going to accuse them of discrimination. You're discriminating against the LGBT crowd by not letting them adopt. Well, the reality is, what nonprofits want is they need protection from discrimination by the LGBT crowd. Because once the LGBT crowd finds out that you're a nonprofit and you honor natural marriage, you want it protected, you want it preserved, you don't want to recognize homosexual marriage, you don't want to be forced into baking a cake or opening your reception center to a homosexual marriage, you need to have the right to be protected in that. If you don't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding, if you don't want to make a flower arrangement for a gay wedding, your right to be free from discrimination ought to be protected. So in reality, when they talk about these anti-discrimination laws that are designed to protect homosexuals, what they do is they release a tidal wave of discriminatory activity against people who hold traditional moral values about marriage and the family. So what we need is we need barriers to protect nonprofits. We need barriers to protect Christians who are in the nonprofit world from being discriminated against by the rabid activist LGBT crowd. So this is what their problem is with Mike Pompeo. Another problem they have, they're listing all the issues they have, the problems with him. They have one of the problems they have with him is that he consulted with Tony Perkins, who's the president of the Family Research Council, which they identify as an anti-LGBT hate group. It's not. It is a pro-family group. But notice that they're saying it is a career killer in their mind for anybody to even talk to somebody from a pro-family organization. He consulted with them. That's all he did. That's his crime. So in the LGBT world, it is a career-ending offense in their perverted worldview even to consult with a pro-family organization. Talk to the wrong people, boom, not qualified to serve in public life. Mike Pompeo opposed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That was the standard that kept open homosexuals from being admitted into the military and carrying out their homosexual behavior while a member of the military. That's creating all kinds of problems. We now have sexual abuse off the charts, and you know which sex is the victim of more sexual assaults and sexual abuse in the military? Not females, it's males. Males are getting abused. There are more males in the military that get sexually abused, sexually assaulted than females. And it's because we got rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Mike Pompeo was on board with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, opposed repealing it. Pompeo was critical of the Supreme Court's ruling on Obergefell that legalized, quote, end quote, same-sex marriage. And he has vowed, listen to this, Mike Pompeo has vowed to continue the fight for the sanctity of life, the solidarity of the family, and the solemnity of marriage. That's Mike Pompeo. That's the kind of guy that we want heading the Department of State, representing America and American values all around the world. So there's a chance we may come up with another action alert or petition for you to sign. Meantime, sign the petition at afa.net opposing Kai Feldblum, urging Trump to withdraw her nomination. Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. What a wonderful example we have been given in the past few weeks of God's grace. Most of you have seen or know of the terrible sex abuse scandal involving Dr. Larry Nassar, the USA gymnastics team doctor, who has been convicted of sexually abusing over 150 female victims. Rachel Denhollander, the last victim to give her impact statement to the court and to Dr. Nassar, spoke eloquently of her outrage and yet also spoke of God's forgiveness and God's grace as a born-again Christian herself. Speaking directly to Dr. Nassar, who faces up to 175 years in prison for his crimes, Rachel said, and I quote, "I pray you experience the soul-crushing weight of guilt so you may someday experience true repentance and true forgiveness from God, which you need far more than forgiveness from me, though I extend that to you as well. Should you ever reach the point of truly facing what you have done, the guilt will be crushing, and that is what makes the gospel of Christ so sweet." Rachel continued, "Because it extends grace and hope and mercy where none should be found, and it will be there for you." End quote. As Christians, we need to be more vigilant to try to stop sexual abuse and take it seriously when people tell us it's happened. But Rachel has given us a wonderful example of God's forgiveness and grace. After all, God's forgiveness and grace is one that should inspire all of us. Whatever people have done to us, an unforgiving spirit poisons the receptacle that holds it. That doesn't mean that what they did was all right, and it doesn't mean they shouldn't be punished by the law for what they've done, but it does mean we should forgive them personally in Christ. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Howdy, and welcome back to Free for All Friday on Focal Point. Remember, we'll take calls on anything that's been in the news this past week. Got to be something that's been in the news, but we kind of opened the parameters, or opened them pretty wide today.
And also, not only Free for All Friday, it's Kelly the intern's 1 week anniversary.
Yes, 1 week ago today, she joined the team. Glad to have her with us.
To be admired that she survived 1 week with us.
And here's
pretty
the thing.
impressive.
She already wants a day off next week.
Wow.
She's been here a week, and she thinks she qualifies for a day off.
At least it's for a good cause, though, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's true. We'll give you a pass on that.
Okay.
Kelly's in the process of selecting the school to go to for college, so she's going to do some work on that next Tuesday. Let's jump into these Tucker Carlson clips, Rob, at the top there, R1, R2. Tucker Carlson exploring a topic here on his show, which I think is a very, very important topic. And I want to begin exploring this topic by referring to the scriptures to get started here, to Genesis chapter 2, and talk about the role of work that God has designed men for. What we're told is that God created Adam, then he created Eve from the side. People think the rib just says side of Adam, took something out of his side and turned it into a woman. And it says in verse 15 of Genesis 2, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Now, this is in chapter 2. When did the fall occur in the Bible? When is that recorded? Genesis chapter 3. That's where they eat of the poisoned fruit, and their eyes are opened, and they realize that they were naked, and all that kind of thing. So this is prior to the fall. In other words, God takes the man and says, look, I've got a job for you to do. I want you to work. I have made you for work. I have designed you for work. I've designed Eve for the family. I've designed her to maintain the interior life of the family. I've designed you to provide for your family by working outside and slaying the dragons. You know, fighting off the pests and the weeds and the thistles and feeding your family through your hard work. So work is something, ladies and gentlemen, that is prior to the fall. A lot of people think that work is a consequence of the fall. It's God's punishment for the fall. Man fell, and therefore God says, I'm going to punish you by making you work. Not that way at all. Work is designed, God has designed men for work, designed men to work outside the home, designed women to work inside the home. In fact, one of the phrases that describes women in the New Testament is a home worker. She's somebody who works at home. So, Debbie used to just drive her crazy when people would ask her, do you work or are you a stay-at-home mom? And she said, I am a stay-at-home mom and therefore I work. She worked longer hours than I did when our kids were young. So a home worker puts her talent and her energies into making her home a beautiful place, a place of rest and tranquility for her family. And Adam is out there in the garden fighting the thistles that were a result of the fall in order to feed his family. So we see that work is a part of the way God has designed men to find fulfillment, to find an image of themselves, to cultivate their sense of worth and their sense of self-esteem, is all connected to man's work. That's an essential part. You'll find people that will try to poo-poo this whole idea. They might say, well, men aren't supposed to make work the center of their lives. All that we understand, but it does not mean that work isn't essential to a man's identity. It is, to be involved in something productive, something that demands talent and abilities that he has to give to the task. Now, Tucker Carlson is talking about the fact that there's a concerted attack right now in our culture against men as males. And part of it, we see a real connection between illegal immigration, but one of the impact is the decline in wages for American males. This is clip 1.
The jobs that remain for men tend to pay less than the ones that disappeared. This is especially true for working class men who, unlike their female counterparts, have seen their real wages fall over time. Now, part of the reason for that is mass immigration. More than 1 million new immigrants enter this country every year legally. A large but unknown number come illegally. Most of these are low-skilled. All of them are looking for work. These new rivals compete primarily with the very Americans most likely to have lost their jobs. And the effect is lower wages. It's a matter of supply and demand. An overabundance of anything makes it cheaper, and that goes for labor. One study conducted after the Mariel boat lift in Florida found that Americans with lower education levels in Miami, the most vulnerable, saw their wages fall by 37% after the immigrants arrived. Policymakers didn't seem to notice, and they still don't, probably because it doesn't affect them. If waves of immigrants from the third world are becoming lawyers and nonprofit executives and members of Congress, how long would the border stay open?
And they'd zip those puppies tighter than a drum right now. Doesn't affect them because these illegal aliens coming across our border don't take their jobs. Remember, we heard that testimony from that whistleblower yesterday. We played the entire soundbite where he said, look, illegal immigrants have taken over every trade. All the construction trades have been taken over virtually completely by illegal aliens. So, when I started out, I was paying guys in 1988, I was paying plumbers $40 an hour in 1988. Now you're lucky if you can get $11 an hour working as a plumber. Why? 2 words, illegal aliens. And part of what Tucker Carlson is saying, look, our policymakers don't notice and they don't even care. It's like if this is decimating the male population, their ability to provide for their families, it's decimating their view of themselves because they can't find work. They don't even care about that. It doesn't affect them. Their preoccupation is making sure that we close the wage gap between men and women. So again, Tucker Carlson, so I think it's, that's one of the elements of illegal immigration we don't talk about a lot, but it's a very, very important thing. We need to clamp down on illegal immigration to preserve the American male. The American family is dependent, if the American family is going to be what God wants it to be, if it's going to be the display of his love and the way he has designed the family and marriage to work, men have to be able to get jobs that enable them to support their families. And those jobs, some of them need to be manual labor jobs, blue-collar jobs, something noble about making a living by working with your hands, getting your hands in the dirt, going home grimy at the end of a workday. There's something noble about that, and we need those kind of jobs in America. The trouble is those jobs now are being taken by illegal aliens, and men, they say, well, we'll just come in and we'll train men to work in IT. Well, they don't want to work IT. What they're gifted to do is work with their hands. They're creative. They're hardworking. They're industrious. That's what they're gifted to do. That's what they want to do. Those jobs are being taken away from. So if we care about the American male, we got to build that wall and keep illegal aliens out. Now here is clip number 2, Tucker Carlson talking about what happens to the American family. So this mass migration is not just a matter of protecting the American male. You say, well, who cares about the American male? Well, that's the problem. But if you don't care about the American male, it's going to damage the family. Let's listen.
When men's wages decline, families fall apart. This fact is well known to researchers. It's been the subject of many studies over decades with consistent results. And yet it's rarely noted in public. Here's some of what we know. One well-regarded study released last year found that when men's wages fell relative to women's, families didn't form. According to the authors, a falling male wage reduced, quote, the attractiveness of men as potential spouses, thus reducing fertility and especially marriage rates. Researchers also noted a dramatic increase in out-of-wedlock births when men made less. In the words of one of the authors, an economics professor at MIT, quote, we see a decline in fertility, a decline in marriage, but a rise in the fraction of births that are disadvantaged. As a consequence, the kids are living in pretty tough circumstances. Numerous academic studies have reached the very same conclusion. Research from 2015 found that, quote, when a randomly chosen woman becomes more likely to earn more than a randomly chosen man, marriage rates decline. Those who do marry report being less satisfied and are more likely to divorce. Low male wages are a driving force in family dissolution, and that's why affluent neighborhoods in which men make more have a higher proportion of married couples and fewer divorces.
So again, this is one of those things, it's just a fact of life that if a man's wife makes more money than he does, that is going to damage his sense of masculinity. There's no way around it. There's no alternative to it. You can say, well, just get over it. Not going to happen. Because so much of the masculine identity is connected to his meaningful work. And the part that makes it meaningful is not just what he's able to build or construct or add to or contribute to. The projects he works on, all those are good. They want to be good projects, noble projects. But it enables him to take care of his family. And that's a critical part of masculinity. And that is being, with this emphasis on, there's more women in college now than men. There are more women in law school than men, and so it's devastating. And so you have women going into the workforce who are going to make more than most of the eligible men. Eligible men might be intimidated by that, or the women say, I don't want to marry somebody where I'm the breadwinner. I want to marry somebody who is going to carry the freight. I'd like to have children someday. I need to marry somebody who's going to make enough money to support us, and they can't do it. So marriage begins to suffer. All right, let's play clip number 3. Talking about what women prefer. People don't even talk about this. Say, well, men just ought to get over it. What about women in this issue of wages between men and women?
What's striking is how little notice these facts get from our policymakers. Their overriding aim is to raise women's wages to parity or above men's. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But these are complex questions with numerous and profound unintended consequences, so they deserve a vigorous public debate. It's notable that most women, the very population on whose behalf these policies are supposedly devised, strongly prefer to marry men who make more than they do. But what's beyond debate is that Washington and corporate America aren't thinking a lot about how to solve the male wage crisis. If anything, they're exacerbating it.
And the reason is they think that if men are making more than women, that there's something wrong with that. That's an evidence of some kind of unhealthy or unholy discrimination. So they don't want men to make wages that comparably are higher than women, not realizing that as they fight this, if they fight this wage differential, they are damaging the American family, and they're making life more difficult for women. Women, and this is a point, women want to marry men who are wage earners, who can support a family. That's what they're looking for in a man. That's what they want. And all of this effort to minimize the capacity of males to earn a living and provide a family is not good for men, it's not good for women, it's not good for the family. Back with your calls, Free for All Friday. Stay with us.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Hi, this is David Barton of Wall Builders Live, inviting you to join me here on American Family Radio this weekend. We take the ideas of the Founding Fathers and apply those ideas to the major issues of the day. Our guests include those who are in the headlines as well as experts on issues facing this great nation. Along the way, you'll discover the role that faith has played in our nation's history as well as in dealing with the issues we face right now. Join us Saturday afternoon at 2 Central here on American Family Radio.
Hey, this is Mike Weaver from Big Daddy Weave. Each of us might have a friend, neighbor, or loved one who struggles with substance abuse, but there is a way out.
I always had to be high. I remember a point in my addiction where I would think about getting sober and I'd start crying because I didn't know what sober was. After going into psychosis in the hospital, I realized I can't keep trying to kill myself every day. I said, Mom, I need help. I want to go somewhere, and came to Teen Challenge. I feel a presence of love here, and not only that, but I have God. I give the cravings to Him. I don't have to carry those anymore. I can now start a new life and have hope in my future with God.
If you or a loved one, whether a teen or an adult, is ready to end an addiction, Teen Challenge can help. You can call them toll-free at 1-855-END-ADDICTION or visit them online at teenchallengeusa.com. You're listening to American Family Radio.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to Free for All Friday on Focal Point, American Family Radio. We'll take your calls. The number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Happy to have you talk about anything that's been in the news this past week. Got to be something that's been on the news this past week, but pretty wide net we're going to cast on this Free for All Friday, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. We were talking about immigration in the last segment. While you're calling in, let's listen to Barack Obama back when he was a United States senator and his comments on the immigration issue.
Agree on the need to better secure the border and to punish employers who choose to hire illegal immigrants. We are a generous and welcoming people here in the United States, but those who enter the country illegally and those who employ them disrespect the rule of law, and they are showing disregard for those who are following the law. We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants.
There is Barack Obama doing his Jeff Sessions imitation. Did he sound like Jeff Sessions in that? That's exactly where Sessions is at, where we're at here. So once Barack Obama believed that, a lot of these Democrats, we got sound bites from the past. Bill Clinton, got a standing ovation back in 1995 saying we have got to shut the borders, we've got to clamp down on illegal immigration, taking jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's just an example of why we need to crack. Just a couple stories I picked up this morning. The Denver sheriff has refused to detain an illegal immigrant who is suspected of leaving the scene of an accident that resulted in death. This illegal immigrant has been charged with vehicular homicide in a fiery crash on the Colorado interstate. He bonded out of jail Saturday, a week after the deadly hit and run, despite being wanted by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That's ICE for short. So they put a detainer on this guy, Ivan Zamaripa Castaneda, 26, fled the scene of the accident involving a tractor trailer that caught fire and left the driver there to die as a result of this accident. And then he took off. He's been charged with vehicular homicide. ICE put a detainer on him. Sheriff's Department said, forget you, we're letting him go. Bonded him out. He is loose now in our culture. Here's another reason why we're having such a problem. The IRS, Internal Revenue Service, they admitted that from 2011 to 2016, there were more than 1.3 million cases of identity theft perpetrated by illegal aliens. This is from the government, from the IRS, from the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. 1.3 million illegal aliens in those 5 years committed identity theft. Guess how many of those felonies have been referred for criminal prosecution? Zero, nada, zip, zilch. Not one did not try to prosecute one of those illegal aliens that's responsible for identity theft. And now this just bizarre thing from San Francisco. We followed, of course, the Kate Steinle story from the very beginning. Jeff and I took a business trip out to the Bay Area and walked right past the place where this thing happened on the Embarcadero there on the San Francisco Bay. And remember, he was acquitted of murder. The guy that killed her, Jose Inez Garcia Zarate, was acquitted of murder. He was convicted of a gun offense, a felony gun offense, having a gun that he wasn't entitled to have, but they acquitted him on the murder charge. Now, if you can believe it, he is suing the government for vindictive prosecution. We got a dead woman, a dead American. He's an illegal alien, has a rap sheet that includes 7 felony convictions and 5 deportations, and now he's the guy that could wind up making out like a bandit. Vindictive prosecution, if you can believe that.
I tell you, Brian, those stories you just read those are the things that is driving Americans nuts right now. I mean, it's infuriating. I mean, any American citizen would be prosecuted several times over, and these guys are, you know.
Yep, it is infuriating, and rightfully so. All right, let's grab some phone calls here, Free for All Friday. Let's start with David, Lafayette, Louisiana. David, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Good day. Yeah, 2 comments, actually. Your little speech on Obama talking about the illegals and how they need to follow the law. Well, this is a prerequisite of being a Democrat. You have to be able to speak out both sides of your mouth.
Yeah.
And the second thing I'd like to say is we're so focused on this income inequality between men and women. Let's look at the whole picture. We have athletes and Hollywood actors make $20 million a year. You realize that's over $100,000 a day? In your lifetime, will you make $20 million? And this is why we're losing the battle. We are going to win the war, but we're losing the battle because these are the people who have the money, who is backing the LGBT and all the progressive movement that's going on. You know, when they were talking about tax reform and Trump was looking at getting a taxation on the NFL, I was ecstatic. And all of a sudden, he backed off. You know, why? These are the people who have the money. Why not take what is due from these people?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your call, David, and I understand exactly where you're coming from. You know, I'm more of a flat tax guy. I'd like to see everybody taxed at exactly the same rate from the first dollar. Everybody. I'm in favor of a flat 10% flat tax. I think that's what Ted Cruz has proposed. You might have to have that pegged a little bit higher to be able to cover the cost of government. But everybody pays the same rate. So you got an NFL guy paying, making $20 million a year. He's going to have to pay $2 million. No way he's going to be able to get around it. No deductions, no write-offs, no nothing that will be able to reduce your tax burden so that the rich will pay their fair share, 10%. But it's an issue. What David's touching on here is, men. We need men to set public policy. Part of the problem that we have is that we're losing the masculine men in public policy as well as other arenas, and it's leaving those that just do not have masculine strength to set our public policy for us. Not good for anybody. Let's go to Jay in Houston, Texas. Jay, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian.
Hey.
Just about the wage earner issue. About the man being the traditional wage earner.
Yeah.
And the woman having a secondary job. But then it came to a point in the U.S. where you both had to work, you know, to make a decent living to raise kids, you know. And it got to that point where just the man used to work, and the man and the woman started having to work. And the point being, you know, I think it's just part of like a social engineering program. You know, where everybody's equal. We're all equal. Well, no, we're not. Let's go back to Genesis. Let's read Genesis. And what does it tell us? That God made man first. And then he made woman. And then the kids came. You know, that the man comes first in that order. He should be able to be the breadwinner, but because of equal rights and affirmative action, and has watered that down to where we're just all equal. Well, no, not in God's eyes, not in His plan. So you've got women that got the man's job making the big money, like at a plant, you know, where they're making a base salary of $80,000 a year. You know, we got women because we have to hire women because, you know, because of equal rights, affirmative action. You know, it takes a man's, you know, high-paying job away from him to be able to take care of his family.
Yeah. All right, listen, I appreciate the call. I remember a good friend of mine back where I used to live, and his wife was the breadwinner in their family, and I did not like what that did to him. She's very prominent. She's kind of a celebrity in that area. And so he was the one that was staying home and taking care of their kids. I just did not like what it did to him. It just drained something out of him, self-respect and whatever. Really nice guy. I mean, I got no beef with him at all. He was a great guy. But it sucked something out of him. Let's go to Mary in Commerce, Texas. Mary, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
On the immigration,
yes, ma'am.
Taking over the jobs of the Americans.
Uh-huh.
My husband was involved in construction for over 40 years, and he worked the Dallas-Fort Worth area until the contractors started hiring the cheaper labor. The same thing happened in Oklahoma. We moved out west, and within 10 years, they started hiring the cheap labor of Hispanics. And really, I think it's too late for the Jenny to go back in for the American male, whether you're white, black, or Hispanic, to profit anymore with a decent-paying job.
So your sense, Mary, your husband's worked in construction, and your sense is the genie's out of the bottle, and we may not be able to get it back in to be able to protect good-paying jobs for American workers, American male workers?
Right, and I looked at the road workers here in Texas, and we passed 3 groups, and there was only all Hispanic. They didn't even have the women sign holders, and you didn't see no white, and you didn't see no black men. And I feel sorry for the black people. I really do, because, I mean, they have actually taken over the taxi cab jobs that used to belong to them, and there's really no but fast food service for people anymore.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, this is where I appreciate your call, Mary. I'm sorry to hear about what's happened to your husband. I'm afraid that is sadly far, far too common. But this is where E-Verify comes into place, where reality is there should be no construction crew anywhere in America that should be able to hire an illegal immigrant that cannot pass the E-Verify screening system. Let's go to Todd in Houston, Texas. Todd, welcome. What's on your mind?
Serfdom.
Serfdom?
If you are interested, yes, if you are interested in just how cheaply you can pay somebody, that's the same attitude that the nobles and others had in the past. What happens to the class of serfs, the only statistic that's important to you is, do I have enough? What happens to individual serfs means nothing to you. That's the attitude that we're receiving from our leadership.
Well, I appreciate your call, Todd. I wish I had more time to explore that with you. It's a fascinating kind of a concept that's kind of pregnant with possibilities. Maybe another time we can talk about that in a little more detail. Thank you for the call, Todd. Appreciate it. We'll be right back after the news. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just 5 short minutes.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The Bible makes it clear that God is the one who gives life. It's a gift that we shouldn't take for granted. Unfortunately, there are those who have a different view of life's value. They would fight for the right to kill an unborn baby and sneer at anyone who believes that human life begins at conception. Life is precious to God, So let's continue to defend the sanctity of life. A reminder from AFA.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening. A pair of investigations are underway in Miami, Florida, to look into the cause of yesterday's collapse of a pedestrian footbridge which crushed cars underneath and took the lives of at least 6 people. Deputy Mayor Maurice Kemp of Miami-Dade County talked about the thought process behind officials as they transition to a recovery and said the goal of everyone is to prevent something like this from ever happening again.
Late last night, we transitioned from a search and rescue mission to one of recovery and investigation. With that transition, our police department, along with their investigative and law enforcement partners, are now in charge of the operation.
A homicide investigation is underway because of the number of dead bodies. However, law enforcement officials are asking for everyone not to jump to conclusions, saying the deployment of a homicide investigation team is routine when dead bodies are involved. The appearance of the North Korean foreign minister in a country that is both friendly to the U.S. and the rogue regime could mean the summit between President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un could become a reality. Fox's Greg Palcott has the story.
Preparations continue for planned summits with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. South Korean officials meeting today say their president's session with the North Korean leader, set for next month at the DMZ, will deal with denuclearization and will aim to pave the way for President Trump's projected summit with Kim in May. North Korea's foreign minister is in Stockholm meeting officials there. Sweden is one of the possible venues for the U.S.-North Korea meeting. This amid reports the North has begun testing a nuclear reactor which could produce material for Pyongyang's growing nuclear arsenal. In London, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
President Trump is reappointing a radical homosexual activist to a post on the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Just a heads up, this story contains some adult themes and might not be appropriate for kids. Here's AFN's Steve Jordahl.
Kai Feldblum has a goal. She wants to use her position on the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to radically change America.
We want to change the American workplace, and we want to revolutionize social norms.
Specifically, what norms does she have a problem with?
How do I think about that strategic plan? Number one, it requires a statement that gay sex is morally good.
And she has the power to get it done. The EEOC is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee. Brad Dacus of Pacific Justice Institute says it's reckless and irresponsible for President Trump to keep her on the commission.
Ms. Feldman endorses polygamy and holds that the institution of marriage offers no value to society. Shiva was quoted as saying, "There can be conflict between religious liberty and sexual liberty, but in almost all cases, the sexual liberty should win."
Dacus says Feldblum is relentlessly working at seeing her vision become the law of the land, and as soon as possible. Never mind that her goals are directly at odds with the First Amendment to the Constitution.
Anyone serving on the EEOC must have respect for the Constitution. And you cannot have respect for the Constitution of the United States when you take the free exercise clause of the First Amendment and put it in the back of the bus behind all these new liberal agendas.
Dacus is asking you to call the White House and demand that the nomination of Kai Feldblum be withdrawn. You can also go to AFA.net and sign the American Family Association's petition demanding the same thing. I'm Steve Jordahl.
Russia's top agency for major crimes says it has opened an investigation into the poisoning in Britain of the daughter of a former Russian double agent and the death of a Russian businessman whose body was found in London this week. The investigative committee said Friday it was ready to work with British authorities in the cases of Yulia Skripal and Nikolai Glushkov. Remember, you can access American Family News 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when you log on to the World Wide Web at onenewsnow.com. And that is American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening.
All of chapter 4 through 19 has to do with what God is going to do when He pours out His wrath upon the earth. The church won't be here. The church will be in heaven. How do we know that? We just looked in through the door and the church is up there already.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
If waves of immigrants from the third world are becoming lawyers and nonprofit executives and members of Congress, how long would the border stay open?
McCabe so far has been worried more about pensions than prison.
They're coming after me because of my city, and they're against LGBT, and they're against poor children. That's been my mantra. I always say the same thing. Our children, our children, our children. I don't think anybody can tell you when life begins. Human life begins. I completely respect a woman's right to choose. It is up to a woman to have her own right to choose the size and timing of her family. God gives us a free will. Our children, our children, our children, our children, our children. Yes, I am a liberal.
When does Hillary Clinton ride off into the sunset?
Not soon enough.
And there was much rejoicing.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point, Free for All Friday on Focal Point. Glad to have you in the conversation. I want to let you know I got a column that's up, just been posted at our website, afa.net. You can find it on the front page. We've also tweeted it out, so if you're on Twitter, don't forget to follow me at Brian J. Fisher. And you can also find a link to the column on our Focal Point website, our Facebook site. Focal Point Brian Fisher is how you find it. And it is about Supreme Court precedents. I'm not going to take a long time because I have visited this issue before. I started off to write about something else, and I got stuck on this, so I'll have to write the next column for Monday. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit, just for a few minutes, is the myth that there is something sacred or sacrosanct or inviolable about Supreme Court precedents. Like this is what we have with Roe v. Wade. Everybody says, well, you can't tamper with Roe v. Wade. It's the what? It's the law of the land. No, it's not. It's a Supreme Court opinion. And remember, Article 1 says that all legislative powers are vested in Congress. All legislative powers. There's not a single bit left over for the Supreme Court to legislate anything. So when it says all, it means all. It means the Supreme Court doesn't have any power, any capacity, any authority, constitutional or otherwise, to enact laws, to enact legislation. So nothing that the Supreme Court does can possibly be the law of the land. They don't have that kind of authority constitutionally. Furthermore, when they issue an opinion, that sets a precedent if it's a new one, and everybody says, hey, this is inviolable, you have to honor it, it's the law of the land, you can't tamper with it, you can't change it, and I am contending in my column this is absolutely flatly false. And one of the reasons we know it's false, because people think, well, look, you can't challenge a Supreme Court precedent. It has to be obeyed and it has to be followed, and all the lower courts are bound to let it guide them in their jurisprudence. But the reality is that not even the Supreme Court believes in the inviolability of its own precedents. Remember that in 1986, the justices issued an opinion that homosexual behavior could be criminalized. In 2003, they issued another opinion that said, no, you can't criminalize homosexual behavior. So notice what it said, 86, you can criminalize homosexual behavior, 2003, you can't. Diametrically opposed opinions. So the court was either right in 1986, it was, or it was right in 2003, it wasn't, but it couldn't have been right both times. So this is a perfect example. I mean, the Supreme Court doing a 180 on a Supreme Court precedent in just a short space of 17 years. They did the same thing with marriage in 2003. The Supreme Court ruled that the definition of marriage was an issue for the states. In 2015, they said, no, it's not. It's got to be nationalized. We're just the ones to do it. And they ordered every state in the union to recognize same-sex marriage. So it's clear then that Supreme Court opinions do not establish binding precedent that every court and every judge must follow. If the court doesn't consider itself bound by its own sacred precedent, why should anybody else? So the court itself, in fact, does not even call their decisions rulings. The word that they use themselves is the word opinion. What they issue are opinions, not rulings. Now, as we mentioned, their rulings, their opinions cannot possibly represent the law of the land because the Constitution gives the Supreme Court no legislative authority whatsoever. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, all as in every last little bit. Now, realize, too, that federal judges have never taken an oath to uphold the opinions of the Supreme Court. This is exceptionally important to remember this. No judge has ever anywhere at any time under any circumstances taken an oath by which he obligates himself to uphold the rulings or the opinions of the Supreme Court. What does his oath bind him to do? To uphold the Constitution and the laws of the United States. So notice that means if there is a conflict between the Constitution and the Supreme Court on an issue that is before a lower court, that lower court is honor-bound, conscience-bound, duty-bound, and oath-bound to follow the Constitution rather than the Supreme Court. If they don't do that, they're violating their oath of office. Now, we've seen this out-of-control judiciary since President Trump took office. Jeff Sessions, a brilliant essay in National Review Online where he said, look, these little tin pot federal judges have exercised 22 nationwide injunctions. I mean, completely outside of their own district and their own jurisdictions. They've imposed a nationwide injunction on these policies that Donald Trump has enacted by executive order. So travel bans or immigration policies, they've issued not just a ban in their own jurisdiction, not just a ban on the person that's in front of them in court, but on the entire country, which they have no authority to do. Donald Trump has no obligation to submit himself to these nationwide injunctions. Now, Jeff Sessions pointed out in the essay in the National Review, I got the link to it in the column, that in one 1897 case, the Supreme Court found that a law was unconstitutional and even recognized that there were many others besides the plaintiff that might be entitled to relief. But the court did not give them relief. The court granted injunctive relief only to the person who presented the application or was the plaintiff in court. Only one person got injunctive relief, not everybody in the country. So the Supreme Court was saying, look, if you're one of the people that didn't get in under this deal, you probably can get injunctive relief, but you got to go to court to get it. Well, we're not going to do that for you. During some of the New Deal controversies, courts concluded that one new tax was unconstitutional more than 1,600 times, but rather than issuing one blanket injunction, nationwide injunction like these judges have done, they issued 1,600 separate injunctions, each applying only to the plaintiff in the case in front of them. One injunction per plaintiff, not for the whole country. So the point here is that when a court found for the plaintiff in front of them on the grounds that the law that was in question was unconstitutional, the relief they granted only applied to the one plaintiff, did not apply to an entire category or class of possible plaintiffs. Others might be entitled to relief, they pointed out, but if they wanted it, they were going to have to go to court to get it. And that's what Judge Moore said with regard to the application of Obergefell, the same-sex ruling. He said, look, I'll accept the fact that those 16 homosexuals that were before the Supreme Court that day, I will accept that they get to have their same-sex licenses. But those 16 and only those 16 have a wedding license granted to them by the Supreme Court. Nobody else does, because they were the only people that were there in court. And Roy Moore says, look, Alabama was not there. we had no opportunity to speak in our own defense, to explain the reasoning behind our constitutional amendment. So it doesn't apply to us because we weren't in court that day. Man, so anyway, something to think about. Columns up at afa.net. We'll be right back.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Free for All Friday. When we get to the phone call segment, happy to take your calls about anything that's been in the news over the course of this past week. And again, we were talking about the fact in the prior segment that Supreme Court rulings are not sacrosanct. They are not inviolable. The Supreme Court itself has reversed itself. One article I read, they reversed itself 200 to 300 times over the course of their career. So these rulings, like Roe v. Wade, are not sacrosanct. They're not the law of the land because, remember, Article 1 says there is no legislative power invested in anybody, any group, any agency other than Congress. All right, well, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Honored to welcome to our decision maker line Dan Gainor, a frequent guest here on Focal Point. Dan is the Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. Dan, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. A lot of stuff going on out there.
Yeah, it sure is, and it's always a pleasure to talk about it to you.
Yeah. Well, let's begin. You know, we got a lot of talk right now about Mike Pompeo, Gina Haspel, waterboarding. I mean, the left is just loading up to go after Gina Haspel. Rand Paul is out there claiming that she headed up the whole waterboarding thing. She cannot be allowed to become the next head of the CIA, disqualified because she is a torturer. And there was a left-wing publication called ProPublica that was out on this topic, and it sounds like Dan, they had to kind of reverse course on themselves.
Hey, they did a 180. I'll tell you, they came out with this story last year, and they reported some things, and they had to basically turn around and say they're just flat out not true, that she wasn't there, that the person that they were talking about, that their sources were talking about, wasn't her. And now, I mean, here's the problem. Look, for all that, I'm very critical of ProPublica because it's a Soros-funded left-wing shop that the traditional media love. They at least were honest about it when they did that. But this story was picked up and ran everywhere, and not just citing ProPublica, but it ran a lot of other places, otherwise. Even in the ProPublica apology, they noted that it ran in the New York Times as well, a similar story. And then you see on social media, and I've been seeing this ever since there was talk about Haspel being named to head up the CIA, you see this everywhere. Oh, well, she's involved in this, she's involved in that. And they're all based on this story from ProPublica. So, look, the Herb and Marion Sandler, the people who funded ProPublica from the very beginning, were enormous left-wingers. They gave to Democrats, they gave to MoveOn.org and the Center for American Progress. And so, they built this left-wing shop that has gained massive credibility with the traditional press, and now, you find out maybe you shouldn't have trusted everything you read.
Well, just another example of how the news gets distorted. There's that saying about how a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on. Here's another example. Apparently that was a narrative that never was challenged and never was corrected. I mean, here we are in March of 2018, and this story they ran with the errors in it was over a year ago, or about a year ago, 2017 sometime. And only now are they getting around to correcting it, which means that everybody that read this story, probably still out there, unless they read their correction, they still believe that she was there present leading the waterboarding, leading the interrogation back at that black site.
Yeah, when you get an MSNBC host and you get conservatives and they're all being critical of this and saying, this is a very major error. And before the media went utterly insane during the Trump campaign and then since, they used to move at a slower pace, and they were less pushing it over one focus agenda to take down a president. We had fewer major media screw-ups. Now, you look at the story that this story could, even though it's been proven false, could still end up impacting who Trump is able to name for his cabinet. We had a Brian Ross story that actually took down the stock market. This keeps happening, and journalists don't want to admit it. They would say, well, yes, of course, in the course of our journalism, sometimes there'll be mistakes. But then don't turn around and be critical when the President of the United States and a lot of other people talk about fake news.
It's interesting on that Brian Ross story. Brian Ross was the one that came out early on that theater shooting in Colorado and said, look, this guy is on it. We found his name on a Tea Party list, entirely uncorroborated, just found his name on a Tea Party list. Wasn't the same guy at all. But he was out there right up front running that thing to the whole world because everybody's tuned in because of the immediacy of that crisis. And there's an error that got out there by Brian Ross, ABC News. Everybody says, well, it's ABC. We ought to be able to trust this as a source of news. And now we discovered Brian Ross, 2 strikes and you're out. I think he's been suspended by ABC because of this last botch, because he did affect the stock market by running a false story because everybody believes what they read in the mainstream media. Now, one interesting thing, Dan, shifting gears here to Kendall Jenner. This is the first time I've ever talked about Kendall Jenner in my life, by the way. But Kendall Jenner, part of the Kardashian clan, and she was on the cover of Vogue's April 2018 edition. She's kind of the star of that publication. And she was asked about her sexuality by Vogue, and that led to kind of an interesting reaction on her part that people dissected and kicked around for a while. Talk to us about that.
Well, what happened was, Kendall Jenner, unlike pretty much anybody else who's got a last name Jenner, apparently, she likes her privacy. So she's kind of been circumspect, appearing with guys she's dated or boyfriends or something like that. And so she admitted, it just came out. And so the story came out that basically she outed herself as straight because, the nature of Hollywood and celebrity land. If you're not openly one way, everybody gossips that you might be the other. And so you've got this story that came out that actually criticized her for outing. It's like, oh, okay, if you're straight, shut up. The idea that somehow you have to be quiet about it when all she was doing was responding to a pretty standard question of, okay, well, we don't see you with guys a lot, and I'm private, but That's the world we're living in now, where if you out yourself as straight, you get criticized.
Well, I remember back in the day, Dan, it wasn't that long ago, where all the conversation was about those who were in the closet because of their sexuality, and back then it was all about homosexuals. We have a coming out day for people who are homosexuals to out themselves to the community. Now it looks like they're trying to shove heterosexuals in that same closet. Since all the gays are out now, a lot of room in that closet. Now they're trying to shove heterosexuals in there.
Yeah, and if you remember, Ira Madison, when he did this, is also notorious for saying really nasty things about the White House press secretary. So I don't want to repeat them because I hated it when he said them. But there's no regulation, no constraint on liberals saying crazy things or being awful to people who are celebrities, because unless you go to the right, if you say something awful from the left, there's no fallout from it.
Talking about entertainment, Dan, one more story before I let you go. This has to do with a new drama over on NBC. And the basic premise, it's based on a true story, apparently, the musical Spring Awakening. It's a controversial play, and it's got a lot of stuff, a lot of very controversial themes in it. And it seems to present a certain view of the sexuality of teenagers and a certain view of the nature of their parents and how tolerant or lacking in tolerance they are. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, you see this show that's going to talk about all the facets of teen sexuality. I won't mention all of them, but we're talking about incest, homosexuality, rape, violence, and they're putting on a play that's going to go over all of this. And of course, you got your standard left-wing teacher, but here's what they set it up. One of the students goes to, he's been cast in a gay role in the play, and he doesn't want to play gay. He goes to the teacher and says, "Hey, look, I don't want to do this to my family. I've got a Down syndrome sister. We're wrestling with a lot, and I don't want to go kiss a guy in a play." And the teacher, of course, being the typical liberal scold that he is, he doesn't want to hear it. Like, oh, well, this is an important play. I've never done important stuff before, and this is going to be important. And I'm sorry that your family, you've got this, old school family, but the idea that you need to rise above that, and in fact, the show is called Rise. And I mean, if I were a parent, and one of my kids told me, like, basically, you said you didn't want to do this role, and the teacher bullied you. Of course, I'd be on the phone to the school. But you're allowed to bully people from the left. You're allowed to say, "Hey, oh, well, that's okay. Your parents are wrong. Their worldview is wrong." That's basically what they're doing. I'm sick of it.
Well, and the way the student, in the script, the way the student approaches the teacher is, look, I have a religious background. We're devout Catholics in our family. I've got a sister with Down syndrome. I really do not want to do this. I don't want rumors to start circulating. And I don't want my parents to have to deal with rumors about my sexuality at church functions and so forth. And the teacher just doesn't let up, says, look, you were made for this role. You're going to be amazing. Maybe it's a little scary, but you need to just get over it, and you're going to be amazing in this role. So the pressure there, as you're pointing out, and the pressure to conform to these images of what they ought to be willing to do and willing to display.
Well, it's a pressure to conform to the new worldview.
Yeah.
The left has been complaining all my life and your life, that you're being forced to make us religious or forced to make us obey these gender rules. But now they're just switching and just making it the reverse. You've got to obey their rules now.
Our guest has been Dan Gainor, Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. Go to newsbusters.org to see what they do. Got that website bookmarked. Use it frequently in show preparation. Couldn't do adequate show preparation without the research that they do. Dan, always a pleasure. Thanks for being with us. God bless you, my friend, and have a terrific weekend. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks. God bless you as well.
Dan Gainor, Media Research Center, Vice President for Business and Culture. Well, when we come back, we got more that we want to talk about, more sound bites to play, more content to deliver. So don't go anywhere. We'll raise and answer the question, is immigration good for immigrants? We'll be back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
We are not allowed to have a U-Haul that comes to heaven with us.
Anna Marie Travers has an AFA Foundation charitable gift annuity.
The Lord has given us things that we can acquire, but you know, everything will stay here, and I'm so thankful for the American Family Annuity Fund, where we can give some to something that we so highly value.
Through the AFA Foundation, a charitable gift annuity provides a monthly income as well as a legacy of support for the American Family Association.
I cannot recommend a better person than they have at AFA to help you with getting your annuity fund. It was so easy.
Call the AFA Foundation today to find out how you can set up a charitable gift annuity. Just call 800-326-4543, extension 345.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Free for All Friday. We'll be taking your calls here in just about 15 minutes. Free for All Friday, talk about anything that's on your mind that's been in the news this past week. Jump back into some more content that I want to give you. There's a big deal about students having walkouts to protest guns and to advocate for gun control. Oh, by the way, I got to do this before we get into that. We are collecting listener stories, and I want to make a personal pitch directly to you as a member of the Focal Point listening audience. We want you to call us with your story about how American Family Radio is making a difference in your life. Listening to Focal Point or listening to one of our other programs on American Family Radio has made a difference in your life. You know, tell us why American Family Radio is important to you and why it's important to your family. Tell us what kind of impact AFR has had on your life, or tell us how God has used AFR in some way in your life. Again, we want to hear from you. You can call the number, record your story. If you don't like what you recorded, call back again, get another crack at it. We'd love to get your story on tape. We can use it before and during our spring share-a-thon, which is April 17 through 19. So again, that number, if you want to write it down, is 877-876-8893. That's the number to call to record your testimony about what AFR has meant to you. Again, that number is 877-876-8893. Give us a call right now and record your story. Now, as you're aware, students all over the country walking out to do their protest about guns. What's interesting to me, I'm looking here at a picture of Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, and he's out there taking part in an anti-gun die-in protest. Picture of him laying down flat on his back on the street with his head in the gutter. lying there dying in with all these other students, and they're protesting guns. Meanwhile, he was surrounded by armed guards. So this is a guy, I'm going to join with these students talking about the evil of guns. They're terrible. They got to go. But I'm not going anywhere without having armed guards with me, even when I am talking to children. So that's Andrew Cuomo. Bernie Sanders, the same deal. There's a national school walkout was held yesterday by students protesting gun violence. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders joined students in D.C. marching on the U.S. Capitol, as did his armed guards. As Sanders traveled through the gun control crowd, at least 3 heavily armed Capitol Police officers could be seen protecting him, clearing a way for the senator through the students. Multiple times in the live feed, the police can be heard asking the students to step back and move away from Sanders. Sanders kept calling to the crowd for the, quote, courage to take out the NRA. Now, this is supposed to be a peaceful walkout, as you are aware, but in Lexington, Kentucky, the students, when they walked out of their classroom to protest, Antioch High School, actually it's near Nashville, Tennessee, they walked out of the classroom. The first thing they did was pull down an American flag hanging from the school flagpole. Then they jumped on a police car and caused general chaos and mayhem on the school grounds.
In addition, there was students in Chicago trashed a Walmart. I saw pictures of it. I mean,
they went nuts in there. Just vandalized that place.
And a lot of these students were told, at least they were told, or their parents were told, that this was actually going to be kind of a memorial for the students that were killed, not so much in a political rally.
Yeah, and they turned it into a Ferguson slash and burn kind of operation. Here's that story that Jeff was talking about from the Fox affiliate in Chicago. Dozens of students from the Simon Career Academy took part in a vandalism spree while they were supposed to be protesting guns. Shoppers and store employees were stunned by the destruction. Now, they were allowed to leave the school for 17 minutes to take part in the nationwide walkout to protest guns. So 30 to 40 of them took advantage of their 17 minutes to cross the street and trash parts of the store. They knocked over product displays, they yanked items off shelves, they broke packages, and they stole small items like chips and candy. So again, here's a walkout. This whole thing is supposed to be about promoting peace. You know, and remember, the Constitution does not guarantee your right to assemble for the purposes of vandalism. It guarantees your right in the First Amendment to peaceably assemble. That's your constitutional right. It's not to violently assemble. You know, and here's a student who's carrying a Trump flag in a Minneapolis walkout, and he got jumped by students in his school. As students were observing a moment of silence, 2 students confronted the flag-bearing student across the street from the campus. 6 other students joined in the confrontation, taking away his flag, damaging his camera, inflicting minor injuries. Now, here's a high school student in Ohio that got suspended because he refused to leave the classroom. He said, I don't want to participate in this. I don't think political activism is proper on a high school campus. I don't want to have anything to do with this. I just want to stay in my classroom and learn something. So he has been suspended because he would not participate in this compulsory anti-gun walkout. Now, there is some sanity out there. Here's a New Jersey school district. They are going to punish students who participated in these walkouts without school permissions. They issued warnings and so forth that if they participated in these walkouts, they would be punished, and they're going to hold to it. The students are going to receive 2-day suspensions. So good for them. By the way, I got a story somewhere. I seem to have lost it, but about students somewhere being paddled. In fact, I have got to find that story. We can't go on without me addressing that story, because I'm saying, man, this ought to be, never will be, but ought to be the wave of the future.
Hey, Brian, while you're looking, can I make a comment on
Absolutely.
On the list of people that you gave that were out supporting these kids and driving them on, it just brought me to the realization that of something that I already knew, This is about people control. It's not about guns. It's all about controlling the people. You look what they're doing with these kids. They're controlling absolutely the mindset of these kids to go out and protest on something that they really don't care
know
about.
anything about. You know, and again, the objective of the left is to disarm us. So they're getting these students convinced that the right thing to do is to protest, to demonstrate, to work, to vote, to advocate against the private ownership of firearms. Here's a story. Arkansas high schoolers punished with a paddle. Love to get your comments on this. A trio of Arkansas high schoolers were punished with a paddle for participating in the nationwide school walkout to protest gun violence. 3 Greenbrier High School students were given the choice between suspension or corporal punishment as a penalty for leaving school. Scott Spainhour, the superintendent, wouldn't say which punishment the students chose, but a woman said they picked paddling. Let's get this thing over with. The mother said, my kids and 2 other students walked out of their rural, very conservative public school. They were given 2 punishment options. They chose corporal punishment. This generation is not playing around. And what they got were what the district calls SWATs on the rear end. You know, a SWAT on a rear end was something like a ping pong paddle, something like that. I mean, God designed the human fanny for the Board of Education. You know, it'll sting, it'll smart, it won't injure, it won't bleed, but boy, it will get the attention of a wayward student.
You know what? There was a judge in Las Vegas. They had a noise ordinance in Las Vegas that basically you couldn't play your music in the car above a certain level. Well, you'd get a ticket for that. The judge would offer them to pay a fine, or they could go into a room and listen to an hour of Wayne Newton music turned real loud. It was pretty effective.
Yeah, so they choose the fine?
Some did, yeah.
You know, every time that I had a choice between paddling or detention, I would choose paddling because you got it over with.
Over with.
You know, you got her done.
Let's grab clip number 5. This is Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris from California. And she's, listen to this, just insults every school teacher in America. These people just cannot help themselves. You know, Hillary Clinton just dumped all over every white wife in America. They just blindly obey their husbands and vote for whoever they tell them to. Here's Kamala Harris. She's talking here about FBI Deputy Director David Bowditch and about the bias that she sees in teachers that are armed to protect their students.
I also have a concern when we talk about this of the impact of having armed teachers as it relates to African American and Hispanic students. And here's why I say that. There is an overwhelming body of evidence that shows that harsh disciplinary protocols disproportionately impact children of color. We know that in the studies that talk about what the rates are in terms of suspension from school. The FBI has done an extraordinary job, I think, of recognizing implicit bias among all professions, including law enforcement, and I would suggest that it applies to all professions. Do you have any concern about a policy that would result in arming teachers and the concern that we should make sure that if something like that were to occur, that there would be training around implicit bias?
So here she is saying, look, everybody carries around implicit bias. They're racists. You look at the statistics about the students that get disciplined or suspended, overwhelmingly they're minority students. Doesn't even stop to ask the question, well, is it possible that they're getting more discipline and more suspensions because they're misbehaving more than their classmates? That's the reality of it. That's the truth of it. But it doesn't matter to them. This is a convenient statistic they can use. Look at the disproportion here. This is plain evidence of racism. And Kamala Harris saying, look, we cannot trust these racist teachers. They carry around this implicit bias, so they hate black students. They hate Hispanic students. You put a gun in their hands, who knows what's going to happen because of the implicit bias they have against minority students. Shameful, shameful stuff. Let's grab Nancy Pelosi. Rob, can we grab clip 6 real quick?
I don't think your opponents should choose your party's leaders. I think that We have an important case to make. They're coming after me because of my city, and they're against LGBT, and they're against poor children. That's been my mantra, the poor children in America that I'm here to support. Yes, I am a liberal.
All right, Nancy Pelosi saying, look, people don't like me, it's because they hate kids. I'm for kids. If they don't like kids, they're going to hate me. There's your answer, folks. Focal Point, be right back.
Hi, this is Dan Celia from Financial Issues. We as God's people need to be good stewards of all that He has given us. That is so important, and that's what drives me each day as I break down the latest financial numbers and talk to listeners across the country about their use of the money that God has entrusted to them. Join me each morning from 8 to 10 Central and Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock Central Time for Financial Issues right here on American Family Radio.
Some 2,000 years ago, the followers of the crucified Christ learned that He had risen from the grave. They quickly spread the word that Jesus was alive. It's good news that spread from one generation to the next, and now it's our turn. One way to tell this extraordinary news to others is by simply wearing and sharing our colorful He Lives Easter buttons. Get your pack of 10 today at afastore.net.
Attention all Christians who believe that America needs a spiritual revival, an awakening, a message of the gospel for our times. This is Alex McFarland encouraging you to attend the 2018 edition of Truth for a New Generation. This is a conference with the theme Save a Nation. And on March 23-24 in Greensboro, North Carolina, you will hear an amazing lineup of speakers, including Josh McDowell, apologist J. Warner Wallace, Lauren Green and Todd Starnes from Fox News, attorney Abe Hamilton III of the American Family Association, music by the bands and orchestra from North Greenville University, and much, much more. Sessions for all ages, equipping you to share your faith confidently in any situation. Visit truthforanewgeneration.com. That's March 23-24, TNG 2018. You can find it at truthforanewgeneration.com.
Presented in part by the American Family Association.
Insubordination and obstruction from Washington. Hello, I'm Walker Wildman, host of Exposing Washington. Tomorrow we're going to talk about how President Trump is not only fighting Congress to get things done, but at times he's fighting his own executive branch. Tune in tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio, free for all Friday, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. Give us a call. Here is Heidi Heitkamp from North Dakota. She's in a competitive race this year. She's one of the vulnerable Democrats running in a state that Donald Trump carried handily over Hillary Clinton. And she's on a talk show that's hosted by her brother. Her brother's name is Joel Heitkamp. And he and Joel Heitkamp asked Heidi Heitkamp, this Democrat from North Dakota, a question. Let's listen.
When does Hillary Clinton ride off into the sunset? I don't want her
know. Not
bashing.
soon enough, I guess.
What's the answer?
Not soon enough.
So the Democrats, again, trying to get as far away from Hillary Clinton as they possibly can. Apparently she had an accident in a bathtub in wherever she was overseas and had to go to the hospital. Broke her wrist.
She was slip sliding all over India. I think it was Mumbai, wasn't it?
Well, that's where she was. I don't know if she's still there, but anyway, had an accident. So we definitely hope that she is okay. I don't want to wish anything bad on her at all. Let's grab clip number 4. Then we'll go to the phones. This is Stephanie Rule. She is an anchor with, I think she's on MSNBC. And they're talking about Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow's the guy that Donald Trump has tapped to be his economic advisor. Great choice. Larry Kudlow, a big free market guy, free enterprise, free trader, smart guy on economics, really dialed in. Terrific choice. As opposed to tariffs, by the way, for the same reasons that I am. But Donald Trump has really modified his whole tariff approach. It's more of a targeted thing, which kind of limits the damage that it possibly could do. Not that bad. You know, broad-scale tariffs, which we thought was where we were going, would be bad. But Donald Trump being a little more targeted may not hurt quite as much. Anyway, Here is Stephanie Rule on there with Ari Melber talking about Larry Kudlow.
Eamon Javers pointed it out on Twitter just a few moments ago. If you notice, when Larry Kudlow spoke on CNBC yesterday, he ended by saying, however things work out, it will be God's will. That's an interesting way to talk about being the National Economic Advisor to the president. God's will. This will be the challenge for Larry Kudlow, because in the position that he's in now, he has to stand there and represent real data.
Right, but the fear is he may stand there and represent the president in the face of real data.
Well, as Larry Kudlow says, it's God's will.
Or represent God in the face of real data, as if God is for false data, God's for bad data, and he's going to have to make a choice between God's bad data and the real data that he gets. So again, what you see here in the mainstream media, just more of that snide contempt for people of Christian faith. They're mocking, they're superior, they are elitist. You know, you'd think after what happened to Joy Behar and The View, they'd be a little more careful, but they're just so full of themselves, they just can't help themselves. All right, let's go. Oh, by the way, New York Daily Post has a headline talking to Hillary. Stop, Hillary. Just stop. So they're trying to save the Democratic Party from Hillary Clinton. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's begin with Brian in Largo, Florida. Brian, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, yeah, I just have I love your show, by the way.
Thank you, sir.
I just have one question for you and another comment. One question for you. Like, in the beginning of your show, when you do the commentary over the Bible, you ever thought about, like, putting them on a CD after you go through the whole Bible and selling them and give, like, support to AFR or doing something, anything like that?
Well, that's definitely a possibility. I don't know that I believe anybody would be convinced to pay money for the comments, but we will think about it. I appreciate this.
I love the commentary.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. You know, we've done that some with the guys on Exploring the Word. Bert Harper and Alex McFarland have taped some of their stuff, and those will be real handy little CD packages or DVD packages to sell. All right, Brian, thank you. That's a very encouraging word. Thank you very much for that. Let's grab a call from Devin in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Devin, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. You played a clip earlier of Barack Obama talking about illegal immigration.
Yes, sir.
I think it would be really interesting to have Donald Trump go on for a State of the Union address and just say, this is what I believe about illegal immigration, and then just play the clip. I mean, video and all of Barack Obama.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that's not a long clip. Let's go ahead and give you an idea what it would be like if Donald Trump took Devin's advice here and just said, here's what I believe about immigration.
Agree on the need to better secure the border and to punish employers who choose to hire illegal immigrants. We are a generous and welcoming people here in the United States, but those who enter the country illegally and those who employ them disrespect the rule of law, and they are showing disregard for those who are following the law. We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants.
All right, Devin. Great suggestion. You know, and you got the same stuff I mentioned. Bill Clinton's got a great speech he gave on the, I think it was one of the State of the Union speeches, got a standing ovation for talking about we got to beef up our border security. We can't let this happen. And everybody in the room loved him. That was 1996. Here's Barack Obama even more recently than that. That was probably around 2005, 2006, something like that. Let's go to Charles in Findlay, Ohio. Charles, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for what you do, and also thanks for what the guys do for you behind the scenes that never get too much recognition. Hey, I know regarding the discipline and all that, I know you guys know this, but there's not a whole lot of parents out there that, or not enough parents out there that know it, and I don't know about politicians, but discipline without love only makes kids worse. I came from a split marriage. I never knew my mom and dad as being married. Over at my dad's house, I got no love, only discipline. Over at my mom's house, I got no discipline, only some love. And at school, I had more paddlings and more in and out of school suspensions than anybody else that I knew. Do you know when I finally grew up? When I was in my 30s. You know, so you got it. We don't call it, punishment or anything like that at our home. We give the kids love. We don't have to spank them because we give them love. We don't have to, do anything like that. Barely, hardly any groundings. Love is the most important thing, along with some discipline.
Yeah. Well, and you're exactly right, Charles. If it's not administered in an environment that is saturated with love, I mean soaked with love, so the child doesn't have any question about the love of his parents for him, then it can do damage. It just can be mean. It just can be cruel, just an expression of anger. And it's clear in the Bible when God disciplines us, it's always an expression of his love. So he does discipline us. It does hurt, but it's always done out of his love. Parents can do the same thing. And as Charles points out, if you have discipline without love, it's just meanness. All right, thanks, Charles. Good call. Let's go to David in Oklahoma. David, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, about the kids walking out. I think they should, the ones that caused the trouble and the destruction should be held accountable for that. They need to be held accountable.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. They, that Walmart thing, they ought to be paying for the damages to all of the stuff, the damage to the flag that they did. I mean, ripping that flag out of the student's hands. It was a Donald Trump supporter beating on him. Yeah, there definitely ought to be a price to pay for that. By the way, show you where we're at. Here's a teacher in California. She asked if the school would allow the students to walk out to protest abortion. You know what happened to her? She got put on leave. She got suspended simply for asking the question in front of her class. All right, let's pick up another call here. Let's go to John in Waycross, Georgia. Did I say that right, John?
No, it's actually Waycross, Georgia.
Waycross, got it. Okay, my bad. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just calling. A lot of the times the conservatives drop the ball when the repressives try to push their weight around. When they bring up the issues with the guns and protest and saying it's killing all the kids, why don't the Republicans come right out and say, well, you want to talk about killing kids? Let's talk about the millions of babies who are being aborted every year.
Yeah.
I don't really understand why they let them get away with it. And there's several issues they let them do that. And another issue that I just wanted you to comment on, I'll get off the phone, is Donald Trump. He's been bringing people in from industry a lot of times to work in the White House, and these people are taking major cuts in their salary. And when they get through with the job that he needs them to do, he sends them back to work in the industry because that's where they're making their money. And I'll let you just respond to that.
All right. Well, I appreciate your call. And, you're right. These guys are taking a sacrifice. I mean, Gary Cohn came over from Goldman Sachs, I think. I don't know what his salary was at Goldman Sachs. It had to be just huge. So, I mean, he's taken, probably a 90 to a 95 to 98% cut in pay to come over there and to serve our country. Good for them for being willing to do it because it is a real sacrifice. Let's go to Donna in Youngstown, Pennsylvania. Donna, what's on your mind? Talk to me. Got about 30 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
I just wanted to say gun violence isn't the root of the problem in our country. It's merely the symptom of an anti-God, anti-conscience culture and socialism that's being taught in our schools and propagated in our media. And I think that those who are marching are proving that by the violence they're doing to stores and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're just kind of living out the kind of worldview that they have grown up with virtually all of their lives. All right, Donna, thank you. Insightful phone call. Appreciate that. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen, for this week of broadcasting. Do not forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap where God has placed you, and never forget, with God's help, we are fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Chatting,
laughing,
blogging, hashing it out,
expression.
Let's talk.
The Stand, a blog for religious freedom, to promote Christian values and to expose attacks on the American family. The Stand is a wall of defense and a beacon of light to those in danger.